shrub. I might do that next year, but this year I was just figuring out.
Go back to the PowerPoint.
I had a beagle cross that thought chipmunk hunting was his goal. Oh, there we are. And so he excavated my entire wall garden.
Okay.
So I rebuilt the first half of the garden this year. The next half is where the shrubs would go. So, hey, okay, we're you. Look at that technology wizard.
You'll need to share your screen too then.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you
Yes.
can put me on. That's it.
Wait a minute. We need one more thing. We need to share. This one. Okay. Should we? All right.
Yeah, look at this technology.
Okay. Now we can do it. Now let's go back to where you need to go.
Four.
You were at this
Yeah,
one.
and I was just about ready to switch to four.
Okay, now let's see.
So
Wait
we
a
got
minute.
everybody.
One more thing. We
One more
need
thing.
to.
That'd be great.
Okay, there we go. We're done.
Ah, all right, there we go. Okay. All right, so in addition to bees and butterflies, other insects are also pollinators. Now, if you're just walking by a flower, you might look at this and think, oh, it's a bee. But how do you know that's not a bee? You count wings, all right?
Two.
Flies have two wings, these have four.
And wasps have,
All right, so count wings. All right, so flies have two wings. They still have that yellow and black coloring. All right, so that's a form of mutualism that gets them, even though they're harmless, protection from, because there's other things that will sting you that are yellow and black, right? Okay, so this is a mimic that mimics a bee. And they gather both pollen and nectar and they use it to feed their larvae, right? So that there is a food reward for this pollination, but we'll talk about what is pollination first and why it matters and how plants attract pollinators. Now that we've got an introduction for like the key groups of pollinators. So in addition to flies, there's also some beetles that do pollination and some, forgot what else I was going to add another insect, but he's on a line. Okay. All right. So a little bit of a wordy slide here, but pollination matters because without pollination, you don't have any seeds or fruits, period. Right? There's about 10% of the plants that are wind pollinated. Things like oak trees and maple trees, the grasses are a big group that's wind pollinated. But all these other fruits and seeds that you see out there, pollination has to come first. And 90% of the reproduction of flowering plants is by animal transfer. There's only about 10% of the plants that are using wind. So it's the transfer. Pollination is just moving the pollen from the male part of a flower to the female part of a flower of that same species. Now, pollen gets all mixed up and transported all over the place, and how that gets sorted out is there's genetic cues that determine which pollen germinates and grows fertilized.
okay.
But native bees, butterflies and moths, beetles and flies, those are the groups of major pollinators we have here. We also have ruby-throated hummingbirds, which are pollinators. And without pollination, you don't get fertilization. The sperm and the pollen has to move down a pollen tube to get to the egg in the ovule of the flower. And that produces through development, produces the seed, and then the ovary becomes the fruit. All right, and you can see the data there. That's this is one of the sources that I think I put a link to this, but I didn't put the link again. This is a really good source of general information on this. Okay. All right, so how do flowers attract pollinators? Visual cues are really important. Different pollinators see color in different ways. So you can see bees are attracted to different colors that butterflies are attracted to. And ruby-throated hummingbirds are definitely drawn to that bright red or orange flowers. Another cue that flowers use is odor. Okay. And as you know, sniffing flowers in your garden, some are spicy, some are sweet, some don't really smell all that much to us. Okay. And one of my favorite flowers is skunk cabbage. There's a picture of that in the bottom corner. So when does skunk cabbage bloom? Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Okay, it actually, you can go looking for it blooming in late February, early March. Okay, it blooms very early in the spring. I would call that more late winter. And the cellular respiration happening as the plant is growing up out of the soil can actually melt the snow and ice. So what in the world is out to do pollinating at that point in time? Hummingbirds are not back. There are no butterflies out about. Flies and beetles are, all right? And so this plant smells like rotting meat. It's even colored like rotting meat. Yeah, all right? Yeah, and so what happens is the dung beetle or the carrion beetle or not dung beetle, carrion beetle or carrion fly actually crawls in there looking for the meat and crawls and bumps into this flower part and picks up pollen and goes, well, there's no food in here. And then it goes to the next flower. And that's how pollen is transferred. So not all flowers smell good. It depends on what kind of pollinator you're trying to attract. All right. So nectar is the primary reward for pollinators. And it is used primarily as a source of energy. It's like the sugar you put in your tea or your shape also matters. So some pollinators hover, some pollinators land and crawl. So it depends on what type of pollinator is being attracted, what the shape of the flower is. So this is my calico aster in the backyard, and that's a sleeping bumblebee. All right. Now, when the temperatures get cool this time of year, or even on a summer night, like a late summer night, if you have like anise hyssop, this is the first place I saw it at a friend's house. We go and watch them. And as the sun went down, the bees would still be there. And all of a sudden they just stop moving. And they'd be right in that place in the anise hyssop overnight. They're not endothermic. They don't generate body heat unless they're actively flapping their wings. And so when their body temperature drops to a certain point, they just go to sleep for the night. And then when the sun hits them, they warm back up. Yeah. And
They don't come flat. I've noticed there are some plants.
see, that's what they're doing. No, yeah, they just went to sleep. They just went to sleep because I went in the house to get my camera. I'm just bopping around with the dog in the backyard. Oh, look, sleeping bumblebees. So I go in to get my camera. And when I left, there were two there. And when I woke up, the warmth of the sunlight had warmed it up. So I only had one flower. That's okay. I don't want the flower picture. But yeah, so things like bees and butterflies, especially the smaller butterflies like the skippers, like a flat, broad platform, like a landing surface. So on the scale of a bee, this is a broad, flat platform, right? Now, not all nectar is created equal. Certain nectars evaporate because of the sugar chemistry more rapidly than others. So in this particular type of flower, the shallow flowers have these guys, glucose and fructose monosaccharides, because they don't evaporate very quickly, so they stay liquid. Okay, so in these flowers, there's a small concentrated amount of nectar that's based on monosaccharides. Now, not all butterflies are small, tiny little skippers. Yes, some have larger.
Aster is a spring flower.
Aster, this is a fall bloom.
I thought Aster, I thought you were saying about the early fall. But a calico, most, as far as I know, all asters are fall.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not sure where did I get it, but. It's probably by Aster.
So I do that, yeah, I understand. Sometimes I miss things, I get it. All right, so, yeah, early fall, I think, is when this guy blooms. It's pretty much done now. All right, so other pollinators like the bigger butterflies and moths and hummingbirds like tubular flowers. All right, so tubular flowers have a different nectar chemistry. Instead, it's rich in sucrose, and this would evaporate too quickly in a short flower. But that's what's feeding the butterflies and the hummingbirds. So this is pineapple sage. Anybody grow that in their gardens? It blooms so late, but I love it. I love it. Does yours overwinter?
Yeah.
Mine does too. Yeah. The folks at Walter said that's amazing and a miracle to have it overwinter. So don't ever disturb it wherever it's planted.
But this year it is not smelly, and I tried drying the leaves, drying the flowers. It doesn't have a flavor or a smell this year. What's
Right.
going on with it?
I don't know. Mine is not as fragrant as usual. That's interesting you mentioned that because I keep going up going, yeah, it barely smells.
No, there's nothing to it.
I don't know if it was something with when we had drought, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know.
I know,
But
the
anyway,
rain.
so this is another mode of pollination. The anthers are dusting the hummingbird on the head. And then as this is a female, as she would go to another flower or another plant, she would transfer the pollen to the next flower. Okay, and I don't know how many of y'all know Mary Barrett, but some of these photos are hers. She's an amazing photographer and was kind enough to loan me some and allow me to use some of her photographs. All right, so nectar is part of the puzzle for what the flowers are producing. And not all nectar is created equal. Sometimes it's a different type of sugar chemistry, as we just talked about. Other times, certain plants actually include amino acids in their nectar. Now, why do we need amino acids? Those are the building blocks of what? Proteins, yes. All right, so and this is a really interesting study that I came across. I'm not sure what I was looking for at that point in time. I just love Googling and reading various scientific papers that different species of plants, not all of them, but many of them actually do have amino acids, the building blocks of proteins in our nectar. So that's important. The other place, though, that has a bigger, better source of protein and building blocks for proteins is pollen. So pollen is rich in protein. And so bees use it as a nutrient, but bees and flies also use it for feeding the larvae. So that's the pollen part of the story. All right, now, why does it matter? Okay. This is like one of the key connection pieces here. If you don't have flowers to be pollinated, and if you don't have pollinators to do the pollinating, you don't have fruits and seeds. There's no way about it. The very few things that birds would eat that are wind pollinated are the grass seeds, and then the maple seeds and the oak seeds, those types of the tree fruits, some of the tree fruits, but all those other cool showy things we have in our gardens all need pollinators. Okay, so, and that pollination piece is the keystone because so many of our heterotrophs need to eat fruits and seeds. All right, so just to make sure we're talking about the same thing, I used some terms before. So in terms of a flower part, we've got the anthers producing pollen. The stigma is the sticky part of the female part of the flower, and that's actually the site of pollination. Then the pollen produces a pollen tube rather, that grows down in through the flower and ends up coming in contact with an egg cell in the ovule. Okay, so the ovule is what becomes a seed, and the ovary is what becomes the fruit. So the pea is a simple thing, but if you've grown like Stelladora daylilies, you know, that brown capsule on the outside that cracks open and lets the seeds out, that's your fruit. So that's akin to this pea pod structure. And then the peas are your seeds. Right. That's your plant bio. That's where I leave my things down. So you've got to have pollinators first, then we get seeds and fruits. All right, so next I'm going to share with you some examples of things that I or my friends grow in their yards that have they're multitasking. All right, so I have a crab tree in my backyard that's a sergeant's crab. Prairie fire is also another good crab apple to add because it has really small fruits. Birds don't eat ginormous crabapple fruits, and they lay on the ground underneath your crabapple and don't go anywhere. So that was one of the things I learned years ago when I was doing my research and when I was doing my landscape degree at George Washington University. We did all our field trips at the National Arboretum. That was a really cool place to have field trips. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all these. I was like, oh, so many cool plants. So sergeant crab is one I learned way back then. And prairie fire is another one. They're small size, they're small scale, which is, you know, I don't have a giant yard in the city. They're not native, but they do provide tremendous amounts of wildlife use. I have bluebirds, I have robins, I have cedar waxwings, I have black-throated blue warblers. The list goes on in terms of what comes and eats these crabapple fruits. Okay? Catbirds, thrashers, mockingbirds, even the white-throated sparrows like these fruits. Before those fruits come, though, in the spring, it's really pretty. And it attracts all sorts of bees because of the pollen and the nectar. So bumblebees, carpenter bees, solitary bees like mining bees, those are examples of our native bees. The honeybees are non-native, but carpenter bees are native, and so are mining bees, and the list goes on. There's actually 21 different species of bumblebees. I have not begun to try to figure out that taxonomy. I just was looking up a simple answer to a question like, oh my goodness, yeah, there were 21 species of bumblebees. So you can really drill deep down into the knowledge and understanding of this. But so this is something to think about. It's a multitasking plant in that you're providing food and, for the pollinators, and you're providing food for the birds that you're going to attract. Now, elderberry is another multitasking plant. It blooms in the late spring, early summer, and all sorts, it's covered with insects, bees and beetles and flies and butterflies, moths even, right? There's a couple species of moths that this is the host plant for. So what does it mean that Polyphemus and Cecropia use it as the host plant? The caterpillars eat the leaves. All right, so that's one of those. I have a very dear friend years ago that they're my godparents, and when I was working on my PhD, I needed a summer job, so they hired me as the farm laborer. And so I'm working in the yard, and Will is like, get rid of those ugly caterpillars off that dill plant, and they're these beautiful green and white and cream, and I'm like yellow. I'm like, Will, remember that butterfly we were just looking at over there that you said was so beautiful? Those caterpillars that you think are so ugly become that. It's like, oh, I didn't know that. You know, so there's frequently this disconnect about, you know, we love butterflies, but are not too keen on caterpillars bad. But if you don't have caterpillars, you don't get butterflies. So you have to plant enough so that you can share the wealth with the butterflies as well. He's still got plenty of bill. I mean, the caterpillars did not eat his whole bill crop. And so that's what this means in terms of the host plant for moths. Polyphemus and Cecropia are two of the big, beautiful moths that live in the deciduous forest like we have here. And so they're going to lay their eggs there. And when the eggs hatch, caterpillars are going to eat the leaves before they make their cocoon and then metamorphose to the adult moths. Thank you. Now, This is beautyberry. Anybody got beautyberry in their yard? Oh my gosh, my mom had to have one as soon as she saw it was purple. She loved herself some purple flowers. So when I was designing her landscape, everything was purple. All right, so American beautyberry is a native shrub. More frequently seen in the landscape trade, though, is a Japanese beautyberry. Okay, they both have the same wildlife use for birds, it seems, but if you want to plant for pollinators, for butterflies, you need the Native American to provide caterpillar. Okay, but it is beautiful and lots and lots of birds come to it. My friend Mary Lou has one in her backyard, and we just sit and watch the birds come. It's just amazing. So, and edible. Oh, we never tried eating it. Oh,
This year they're not as sweet as they usually are either, but yeah, you're not gonna die.
cool. Hey, I think good take those things when I hear them, but that's good to know.
Oh, and the nice thing about blueberries is you reach them a little. They don't need to help.
Yeah. Yes, and that's also true of most of the plants I'm showing are not the top choice for deer. Yeah, because I have deer that hop over my 4.5 foot fence and come here.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I had Sheldon, my wonder dog. They didn't come while Sheldon was there, but Izzy is only like 20 pounds and they don't take her seriously yet. Exactly. She's working and learning how to make a morning dog sloth. So she's in training. She's a dog in training. We'll see. All right, so American beautyberry, if you can find that, it's not only pollinated by bees and butterflies, which the Japanese will also be pollinated by, but if you want to be a larval host for these two guys, this is a spring azure butterfly, and this is what we call a clearwing moth or a hummingbird moth. They look like hummingbirds coming to your flowers, but when you look at them up close, they're hovering in place like a hummingbird would, but they're actually a moth. You see their little antennae on the So if you want to be a larval host for the caterpillars feeding on the plant leaves, you got to find the American beautyberry. Mary Lou has not seen any caterpillar use on her Japanese beautyberry, but the wildlife use for the bees and the butterflies as pollinators and the berries for birds, definitely. Either species works. Now, one thing that's not a planting thing, how many of you guys have a bird bath in your backyard? Way to go! Woo! Because that's something that frequently is overlooked. And you have these lovely landscapes, but water is something that will attract species of birds you wouldn't even see eating your fruits and your seeds. So, very simple. Again, another great picture by Mary Lou. I love the stop action of the water. She's good. All right, so bird baths ideally should be off the ground. They should be shallow. A friend of mine got a new bird bath and she's like, why is nobody using my bird bath? And we went and looked at it and it was too deep. So what I had her do is put a rock in the middle and then they started using it because then they could hop in and off the rock, in and off the edge, and that made it just okay to start using it. Now this one also has something called a dripper. Here's the line, and then it's dripping water. These are beautiful cedar waxwings. Birds love the sound of water. So anybody have a pond and a waterfall in their backyard? Oh, you lucky human beings. I'm envious. One of these days I would love to add that to my yard because a lot of Mary Lou's amazing photographs she's taken at her she has a waterfall pond in her backyard. But a dripper is something that's easy to add. The one thing I have added, which is amazing, is you can get a heated bird bath. All right. And this, I love this picture. I've not had quite that many, but I've had 7 or 8 bluebirds at a time at my bird bath in the winter. And they don't come to my yard that often. They'll come for the crab apples. And they come for the hot water bath in the winter. And so you can buy them that are on a stand. You can buy them that you can attach to your deck if you have deck railing. And you just plug them in. They have a thermostat, so it cuts off when it thaws the water. but that will get you more dividends than any one single shrub you're gonna plant. So think about winter water. It's amazingly fun. My mom just would be calling me going, oh, 2 dozen robins in my bird, and they just come in droves when, especially in the winter when we've had a lot of cold weather and things have frozen up. And it's a resource they need year round.
I put a big flat rock in the middle of mine during the spring and summer. Because I've seen, butterflies.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. That's true. Yeah, butterflies like moist sand. You can also do moist sand for butterflies as well, but that's a neat thing having them come to the rock. I like that. All right, so I mentioned before trees, all right? The trees on this list are wind pollinated, so they're not necessarily something you would probably go out and plant in your yard unless you are fortunate to have way more land than I have. But I do have these in the landscape around me, right? My neighbor has a beautiful big red oak, white oak, black cherry willows are just 2 examples, okay? They are hugely important for feeding baby birds, and what the baby birds are eating are the caterpillars that are eating the leaves. All right, so they're making butterflies and they're also making baby birds. And Talame has some interest, Talame, I'm not sure how he acts, what accent he puts on the syllable, but he had this amazing statistic in one of his books. Chickadee parents eat up to 9,000 caterpillars for a single batch of baby chickadees. That's an awful lot of caterpillars. And one oak tree can do that and more. Okay, so, but the caterpillars are eating the leaves. So, yes, I mean, it's okay. Caterpillars are not bad.
Is it only the white oak that provides the
No,
cat?
the other oaks will get used, but the white oak has less tannins, and so it does tend to attract more. Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so one thing we can all do, and what I'm working on doing is anytime I have a plant that I just planted when I was trying to get the garden started, because when I moved in, I had 2 flowering dogwood trees, one of which was succumbing to anthrax. And I had a privet patch. That's all I had. I had a lot of grass, which is good. It was a blank slate. So some things you pick when you first put them in the garden, they thrive, some do not thrive. So as things are not thriving or getting replaced, I'm shopping on a list that includes asters and goldenrods and other native perennials that'll provide food for the pollinators, caterpillar food, as well as seeds or fruits for birds. So I'm getting things that can multitask, because while we were uploading our friends online, in Zoom, we were answering your questions, and this morning I have evening primroses in my backyard, and the goldfinches were eating the seeds out of the evening primrose. And then I have asters planted in addition to the calico aster, I have New York aster, or New England aster, and the goldfinches were eating that, the white-throated sparrows were eating that. Tiny little seeds. So they've already started. So I'll give you some examples of what you can suggest, food for thought, what we can add to our garden. All right, now this is one of the most popular, common ones that probably everybody in this room and most people, if you did an interview on the sidewalk downtown and center of the square, would know about monarchs and milkweed. All right, and for some reason, people are connecting the dots that, yeah, caterpillars and monarchs need to eat milkweed. But it's all those other caterpillars we don't think so much about, but hopefully we will now. And so the chemicals in that particular leaf or in the various particular leaves these caterpillars eat provide the appropriate nutrition for them to grow and develop into the butterfly or the moth that they're going to become. So Mary Lou has lots of milkweed in her backyard, and she had so many, she fledged, I don't know what the word for a butterfly is, that's the bird term, but she fledged a bunch of monarchs this year. And she got to watch them actually come out of the chrysalis. She doesn't have the perfect shot she wants yet, but I mean, those are good photos. And then the adult monarchs they will nectar on both native and non-native species. Now, this is a Mexican sunflower. Anybody grow Mexican sunflowers? Those are they are rich in nectar and pollen, so they really draw the pollinators in. It's not a native plant, but I haven't had any problems with it getting wild and crazy, taking over my yard yet. And the goldfinches are already eating the seeds in that. So if you want goldfinches, there's a couple of foolproof plants. Purple coneflower is one of them, all right? So all sorts of bees come to it, butterflies come to it, and I think it's just gorgeous to get the goldfinches come to it. So it's definitely a thing to add. And they come in different heights, different amounts of purple. Some are a little pinker, like in these flowers, but definitely something to think about adding if you don't have that. So, in addition to seeds for birds and pollen and nectar for pollinators, there is a common little butterfly around here called silvery checker spot. It's about this big, and it's a real pretty orange and black butterfly. It has a white dot right there. That's how you know it's a checker spot and not a closely related butterfly. Okay, and this is one where the butterfly is nectaring on that flower, and it's going to lay its eggs on that flower, and the caterpillar is going to eat the leaves of purple coneflowers. So if you see caterpillars on your purple coneflower, don't panic. There are several species of butterflies around here that do eat it. Take a picture and go, with Seek is pretty good at caterpillar ID, or go to Cooperative Extension. Yeah, where you guys are at. Yeah. So these silvery checker spots also will, the caterpillars will also eat asters and black-eyed Susans and sunflowers. Now, anybody got blazing star in their gardens? All right, so this is another composite. A lot of things in Asteraceae provide all sorts of nectar and pollen, so they're very popular with pollinators. And so we've got tiger swallowtail, we've got pipeline swallowtail. I think, I'm looking at those online. And then we've got this guy here, which is a painted lake. All right, so those all come in nectar, and goldfinches, sparrows, juncos eat the seeds. So you're getting bang for your buck. You're getting pollinators and birds. Okay. All right. So most of the Asteraceae are really good, as I mentioned, for bees and honeybees. So black-eyed Susans, New England aster. So think about adding bees if you haven't. Those have pollinator use, and they're seeds for birds in the fall. New York ironweed is a native plant. Anybody growing that?
No, but I have seeds.
Huh?
No, I have seeds.
Yeah. Yarrow? Okay. So these are examples of butterflies that are nectaring on the plants that they'll lay their eggs on, and their caterpillars will eat the leaves. So these are things you can add to your yard with the hope that you will get these guys to have caterpillars, and then get the adult butterflies. All right, so goldenrods are another thing to think about adding. Joe Pyeweed is another thing to think about adding. So the same story. You've got lots of nectar and pollen for pollinators, and then you've got seeds for sparrows, finches, and chickadees, titmice also. Wild bergamot. Now that's not a composite. Okay, anybody got wild bergamot?
Everywhere.
Oh, all right, good. Right. All right, so lots and lots of different pollinators are going to visit that. There's actually a tiny little bee that only pollinates this, and it depends on this particular plant for its survival. So it uses the pollen for raising its larvae. Columbine. All right, anybody got columbine in their gardens? Yes, that's good. All right, so what pollinates that? Hummingbirds. ruby-throated hummingbirds, all right? So one of the beauties of this is it blooms very early in the spring where there's not much other nectar available. So, again, this time of year, after it goes to seed, finches and sparrows and juncos, they're gonna pick it up in the seed bank at the bottom of your, underneath the plant this winter. All right, so a couple last slides here. So we talked about having a great resource in townside gardens for native plants. So what's the difference between a native and a native or a nativar and an actual species that would be existing in the wild? So the nativars are cultivars, selected varieties that have been selected for the genetics of color or size. So true natives are best. If you look at the tag and it has a name like this, in single quotes, that means there's been some genetic selection done to it. Now, it depends on the plant whether that's affecting how much the native pollinators will use it or not. Some plants transition well in this situation and continue to be used, like most of the purple sunflowers I have were just fine. And they're not all from the Blue Ridge Wildflower Society where I knew they were wild ground species. So think about that. But go online and Google. You can find there's been a lot of research done. Now, this is another one of Cornell's ideas, all right? So why to not deadhead perennials in the fall? So if you come to my garden, you will think I'm lazy, but I'm not lazy. I am leaving, I'm leaving all my perennials standing for the finches and the sparrows. And I already this week, it's like it's suddenly some little switch kicked in. Suddenly I have goldfinches in the yard that I haven't seen for months. And I have white-throated sparrows back, I have song sparrows back, and they're all starting to eat the seed heads of the various perennials I've planted, especially the composites. All right. So New England asters, purple coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, goldenrod, ornamental grasses are all in my backyard. And over the fall and winter, I get all sorts of different native species eating those seeds, right? So when do you cut them back? Okay, again, my neighbor on the downhill side thinks I'm a little different, shall we say. All right, so one of the other things Cornell is suggesting is you don't cut stems back until I wait and the new part of the perennial grows up and hides those stems. And when they're hiding the stems, then I cut them back. Because native bees actually lay their eggs in the stems of things like coneflowers and black-eyed Susans and such. Okay, and let's see. And then the other piece of the puzzle is, I think I might have a slide out of order here. The other thing is why to not rake your leaves in the fall. Now this really gets my neighbors going. All right. Now I do rake my lawn. I don't ever, and nor does Cornell. None of us is advocating you leave it on your grass. But if you leave the leaves laying in your flower beds, there are multiple benefits. As those leaves decompose, they are providing sugars and proteins, nutrients for the soil. They're also providing organic matter for the soil. And there are all sorts of native pollinators that lay their eggs and their pupa live in the leaves over the winter. Like I've just started seeing woolly bears out. They've got really long brown spot, brown stripe, which my mom said a wintry winter. So we'll see if the woolly bears know what they're doing. But they spend the winter sleeping like this in the leaves, in the bottom of your flower bed. Right? And then in the spring, they metamorphose into a really pretty moth. So think about leaving your leaves in your flower bed areas and then picking them up later in the spring after it warms up. So having taught for 20 some years, I didn't get done with school until May 15th was my last day under contract. that's when I started moving leaves and trimming things back. So it kind of naturally kept me too busy. So it taught me these habits, you know, they were habits of. All right, yeah, I do have this out of order. So this is a picture of two of the different types of insects that lay their eggs in the stems of perennials. So food for thought. For thought, in terms of leaving those. So mason bees and carpenter bees.
Okay, are we almost done?
All right, so, in summary, if you have all sorts of cool plants of the right sort in your backyard gardens, you can be providing habitat for pollinators and all sorts of amazing, wonderful birds. And these are two resources that I suggest that are free. DEQ is way more about plants. The DWR is more about if you want to build a garden pond or a waterfall, or if you want to build a brush pile, if you want to build nesting boxes, which, all sorts of things. So that's a broader site. Anyway, so I hope you've got some new ideas for what you can do in your gardens, or what
Yes.
not to do in your gardens, as the case may be. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, break time.
Questions? I know we went a little longer. We had our technology interview.
Because
There's a
of-
technology moment there.
Because we're running a little behind, but the business meeting's gonna be short, so. All right, let's see. If you don't mind, I'm going to, download your, because you have references, and I'm gonna compile it into one thing to send it out.
Oh, okay. So these guys are the ones I would download. Yeah, the others are, but if you want to do the others, that's fine. They're smaller, but these are the meteor ones. Question.
It's a Frankie. I know, right? You. Everything clean up. That we get to this set. We did that. I mean, watch them. Frankie, do you stop?
No.
And they can start like anybody else. Your best hat. And I just did that. Didn't tell me.
Can't get down there.
Here.
They are. I know. Stop recording is right there.